Everyone wants peace. We all want peace. We think about peace. We strategize about peace. We talk about peace. We work for peace. We hope for peace. We spend money on peace. We, people of faith, pray for peace. Everyone, in their best self, asked in their most tender moment, would say, I want peace for myself and for my children. Everyone is longing for peace. And of course, if everyone is longing for peace, if we all want the same thing, it sort of begs the question about why peace is so elusive. If we all want peace so badly, why on earth is peace so difficult to come by? Why is peace so challenging? And we look out in the world, we look at our society, we look at clashes between cultures, and there's just all sorts of evidence all around us all the time that even though all sorts of people say that we want peace, we just simply cannot figure out in the nitty-gritty of making life work with one another to figure out how to have peace and how to bring peace to a world that says it's longing for peace. It can be easy when we look at things external to ourselves to think that the problem with finding peace is out there. Like it's something that's happening to other people. Those people out there can't figure out how to be peaceful. But if we're really honest, our lives are not peaceful. If there are conflicts all over the world, there certainly are conflicts all over our own lives. Like our life seems like it's just moving from one conflict to the next. And just as soon as we get one conflict patched up, we find some new way to stumble into some new conflict with somebody else. It's a little disingenuous, isn't it, to say that those people out there can't have peace when our lives have conflict written all over them. And it's not just conflict that we have with other people, is it? It's conflict that we have with ourselves. We're not even internally at peace. It's like there's conflict out there, and then there's conflict with ourselves in our immediate sphere, but then there's just raw internal conflict. The lack of peace that we have just in ourselves. We're not settled in ourselves. We're fighting with ourselves. We're critical and full of anxiety. We're not able to just sit and be still and settled even in ourselves. Why is it so hard not just to have peace out there, world peace? Oh my gosh, what a dream. Why is it just so hard to have singular, simple, internal peace, just with myself? And what are the costs of not being able to just be a peaceful person? What hope is there for the world of achieving peace if we're not even peaceful people? Why is peace so hard to come by? And how can we begin to have some peace in our lives? How do we become peaceful people, regardless of whether or not our circumstances are peaceful? These are some of the questions that we're going to be asking today. We're in the middle of an Advent sermon series called The Bright Valley. Life is a valley. Our lives often feel like we are just trudging through some dark valley, and we feel like we are in a low place and a dark place and sometimes a lost place when we're in the valleys that life gives to us. But in Advent, we receive a particular kind of good news, a good news to those of us who are walking through a valley, and it's that God has lit the valley with various lights so that we're not alone in the valley. We're not just staggering around, groping around in the dark. God has lit the way even in hard times and places in our lives. And there are 4 lights that we remember in this Advent season that light the valleys of our lives. And those lights are hope, peace, joy, and love. And today we are looking at the light of peace. I've titled today's sermon, The Light of Peace. Our text today is going to be in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 6 through 9. 4 minutes? Yeah, 4 minutes. Woo! He'll be back. He'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. He'll be back. You need to hear Jonah. We're not running away. We're not running away from the Lord. We're in Isaiah. We're in the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verses 6 to 9. I would love it if you had a device or a Bible to Open up to the text. There are Bibles. Yes, Sarah's grabbing Bibles. Perfect right there. She's got a Bible. There are Bibles right there. If you don't have a Bible, you can take one of those and take it home and keep it. Again, we're in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 6 to 9. I'll read the text aloud. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. And the calf and the lion and the fatted calf together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. We long for a peaceful world, but our world is not peaceful. There's a grand and wonderful vision here of total peace in the absence of conflict in God's reality in Isaiah 11, verse 9, when he says, they shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. The Hebrew words here are ra'ah and shachat, and they mean evil or harm or ruin or a marring or destruction. And so there's a vision here of a total absence of evil, of harm, of desecration, of destruction, of ruin, of acidity, of the things that tear down, that lead to conflict and rob us of our peace. And the vision places this peaceful locale in what the text says here is God's holy mountain, my holy mountain. Now, in the immediate geographical context of the text of Isaiah, God's holy mountain would have been the western hill, the western mount of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is literally built on two hills, the western hill and the eastern hill. And I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Western hill, eastern hill. It's the eastern hill. The eastern hill is where the temple of the Lord is built on. And so God's holy mountain is the mountain where the temple is built on. And so to say here that there's peace, there's an absence of conflict on God's holy mountain is to say that the place where people meet with God is a place of total peace. The place of humans' encounter together with the divine is a place where all evil and harm and destruction is totally removed. And in the context of the prophecy of Isaiah, that specific geographical locale begins to enlarge into a prophetic hope where all of reality becomes God's holy mountain. The physical reality of God's holy mountain, the place where God's temple actually was, becomes a sign of the way in which all the earth is going to be God's holy mountain, where all of reality, all of creation is the place of encounter of humans with the divine. And that in that place of total encounter in all of reality, that all evil and hurt and harm and destruction will be removed. And so Isaiah here in verse 9 envisions a reality of total peace. Yet this reality feels like a long way off. We know in our lives and in our world that there is evil and hurt and harm and ruin and destruction and pain everywhere. And our world is constantly full of every single kind of conflict that we can imagine. We have internal conflict with ourselves. Individuals have conflict with other individuals. Friend groups have conflict with other friend groups. Societies have conflicts at a societal level. Cultures have conflict with other cultures. Nations have conflicts among nations. Majority cultures oppress minority culture. We just have every single, and then we don't just have the sort of primary conflicts in our world. We then have conflicts about the conflicts. We disagree about how to resolve the conflict. We disagree about who's right in the conflict. We disagree about, we just have conflict over conflict over conflict stacked on top of each other, just increasing all the time. Our world is full of conflicts that mock the raw idea that peace even exists, let alone that it's something that we could achieve on some wide scale. It's not just that there are conflicts. Oftentimes we think, here's a conflict. I'm going to solve it, and then the conflict will be gone. Wonderful. Wouldn't that be great? If we just saw a conflict, saw a problem that was robbing people of peace, we walked in, we solved it, wonderful, it's gone. And we sort of have this idea in our mind, especially in our time, in our society today, that the world is full of a finite number of problems, and if we can just tick all the boxes, we'll solve all the problems, and everything will be solved. Wonderful, we solved all the problems. But the problem is, so often, maybe even almost all the time, our solutions to a problem create new problems. Isn't that true? Even with our best intentions, we create new problems as we solve old ones. Just one example of this. I don't know if you've read recently about the rise of superbugs. If you are in the medical field, I'm sure that you've been following this for some time, but it's in the news a little bit more now. You know, we've been using antibiotics for about 100 years. Yay, penicillin, late 1920s. We could cure bacterial infections that normally could have threatened your life. Wonderful. But you know what? After 100 years of using antibiotics and overprescribing them, bacteria went, you know what? I see your antibiotics, and I'm going to raise you anti-antibiotics. And now we've created superbugs that are antibiotic resistant. And we have a whole new set of problems. In one article that I read about this, just in this last year, there have been 2.8 million, in the United States, 2.8 million infections that have been specifically the product of antibiotic-resistant drugs, causing 35,000 deaths in the United States and 1.27 million deaths globally from bacteria that now have particular resistance to antibiotics because of our using of them. And this just physical problem is itself a spiritual sign of the way in which we set out in our lives to address immaterial problems like hatred or inequalities or just raw relational conflict with one another, and we solve something in the moment and somehow create another problem right along the way. The reality is that our world, our reality is full of conflicts and things that rob us of peace. Conflicts in our world is a feature and not a bug of the way that this world is built. It's full of conflicts proliferating over and over again with one another. Our world is not peaceful, not just because of a handful of conflicts that exist, but because it is not peaceful by nature. Our world is not peaceful because it's not peaceful in its nature. The concept of nature and the nature of our world is something that has received a good amount of attention from writers and philosophers since the Enlightenment in the Western world, and people have debated whether or not our world by nature is basically good, and as a result we should be optimistic about it, or if it's basically evil, and as a result we should be pessimistic about it. And certain thinkers like Leibniz, if you've ever heard of him, he was a 17th century French philosopher, he said that the world that we live in is the best of all possible worlds. This is the best of all possible worlds. And there was just, you can't even hear it with that phrase, right? Just huge optimism, right, about our world in that time. Similarly, slightly less optimistic flair, but similarly, the Romantic British poets of the 18th and the early 19th century spoke about nature, like William Wordsworth. You've read William Wordsworth, spoke of nature in flowery, gorgeous, beautiful terms. And we can look at nature in its idyllic sort of sense and learn from how idyllic and how peaceful nature is. And so learn by observing an idyllic pastoral picture and go, I want to emulate that in my own life. Well, there's been another strand of thinking in the Enlightenment that has said that way of thinking about the nature of our world is wrong, that we're not good, we're evil, and so we should be pessimistic instead of optimistic. So the French thinker Voltaire famously wrote Candide. Has anyone seen Candide, read Candide? Yeah, Candide. What? You read it, Candide, exactly. And there's a wonderful operetta of Candide. I don't know if, musical theater background people might know it. It is it is the cynicism of Voltaire's view of the optimism of the world written into musical theater. And there are some numbers in there that you just have to experience on your own. And in particular, there are a couple numbers where, the people at the beginning of the play are running around going, this is the best of all possible worlds. And then, of course, everything that's horrible in the world happens for the rest of the musical. And Voltaire just burnt that idea to the ground, right? The idea that the world is some Pollyanna, optimistic whatever, right? there were a couple of episodes of natural disaster in particular that happened in the world at this time that helped to shake people's naive view of just the raw goodness of nature. One of them was an earthquake that hit Lisbon in 1755. Did I put a picture up here of that? I meant to. There's no picture in there. Dang it, bummer. It's a good picture, and you would be shocked. Lisbon sits on the coast. There's an ocean right next to Lisbon, and in 1755 there was a 7.7 magnitude earthquake, and not only did it shake the city and just collapse it and create fires everywhere, but it created multiple tsunamis that just came up and just totally dumped a huge amount of water on the city, and overnight 30,000 people died. I mean, just horrific natural disaster. And thinkers looked at that and they went, how on earth can you say that this world is good or it's the best of all possible worlds when something this random can happen and cause so much death and destruction in the world? And this way of thinking was picked up in 19th century England, just on the cusp of Darwin's theory of evolution being published, that picked this up and said, look, nature is brutal and random and evil and careless and bloody. And one of the most famous poems that embodies this line of thinking, it's called In Memoriam from Alfred Lord Tennyson. This is what the poem reads. Our God and nature then at strife, that nature lends such evil dreams. So careful of the type she seems, so careless of the single life. And by single life here, the poem is not saying, single life. The poem is saying the single life. Nature's uncaring of one life. That I, considering everywhere her secret meaning in her deeds, and finding that of 50 seeds, she often brings just one to bear. Here now in the famous line, men trusted God was love indeed, and love creation's final law, though nature red in tooth and claw, with ravine shrieked against his creed. And here in these lines, right, Tennyson is reflecting on, he's trying to find God's law of love in the created order, but he looks at it and goes, why would nature then bring one plant to bear after having 50 seeds? That seems so wasteful. Right? And then at the end, he goes, men trusted that God's law was love. But when we look at nature, it seems raw and bloody and combative and violent. And he's struggling with how to be able to have faith in a God that has put this whole order together in a nature that seems so bloody and unpeaceful. And this view of our world as not at all peaceful, as full of conflict, as full of pain, is the same sort of view that is undergirding our text in Isaiah today. This is why this vision in Isaiah is so profound. When it talks about all these animals, all these predators who are not acting in a way that is according to their nature. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard lie down with the young goat. The cow and the bear shall graze. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the adder's den. This text is not just creating a vision of God delivering people out from the mouths of violent animals, right? We see that in other places in the Bible, right? Like Daniel in the lion's den. Look for me at what Daniel says when he's delivered out of the lion's den. In Daniel chapter 6, verse 22, he says, my God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me. Right? That's what it looks like for the Bible to talk about God delivering people out from violent animals. What we see here in Isaiah are animals whose natures have been completely changed. A wolf is now lying down in a gentle posture with an animal that 10 seconds earlier it would have by nature wanted to kill and eat. A bear is grazing, eating grass instead of trying to slap salmon out of a river. A lion is eating hay. Snakes are not defending their dens in some vicious and violent way. What we see here in Isaiah chapter 6 through 8 are animals whose nature have been totally changed. These animals are not peaceful by nature. They are predators by nature. They live through conflict. But God has changed their nature in this vision, and so they have become peaceful. And our entire world is like this. We don't know how to be peaceful because we're not peaceful in our nature. It's not just that we haven't chosen peace enough. It's not just that we haven't solved enough conflicts. It's that we are not peaceful in our nature. And we see this written all over our world. Our animals don't know peace. Our weather systems don't know peace. Our social systems don't know peace. Our governments don't know peace. Our entire world in its nature rebels against peace and is ignorant of peace. Our world cannot have peace when it doesn't know how to be peaceful. And if all the elements of our world are like this, if all the elements of our world do not know peace, it is simply a sign that there's no greater offenders against the hope of peace in this world than you and me. Our world doesn't know peace because we don't know peace. We are not peaceful in our nature, and so we don't know how to be peaceful. These animals are signs of our own nature. They're signs of the way that we are in the world, towards other people and towards ourselves. There's a funny moment in Genesis chapter 49 when Jacob is about to die, and so he's blessing all his sons. He's like, I've got a final word for all my boys, and I'm going to give you the best thing that I've got for you. Welcome. There are chairs, a couple chairs here, two somewhere. Someone make two. Scoot in. Yes, perfect. Jacob is blessing his sons. He's like, what's the best possible thing that I can give you? Giving them all these great words at the end. And then he comes to Benjamin. And you know, these prophecies are like, these prophecies and blessings, they're like calling out something that is like true about the nature of that child and their children's children. Something's going to be true about them for a long time. And this is what Jacob has to give Benjamin. With many of his kids, he's got these long things to say about them. But this is what he says to Benjamin. He says, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey. In the evening, he divides the plunder. Awesome. I mean, like, what an awkward moment. So, like, you know, like all the sons, I imagine all the sons are like in a room and they go one by one, like to get their blessing from their dad. And like they all come back out and share all the great things the dad said about them. And then Benjamin comes out and they're like, what do you say about you? And he's like, I'm going to kill a bunch, I guess. You know, I'm like a murderous something. I'm devouring. I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm killing the prey. I'm devouring the plunder. And actually, if you know your biblical history, Benjamin does this in some super weird way in the book of Judges. Anybody know the story I'm referring to? Benjamin starts a civil war against Israel, and they kill a bunch of people. And then once they're finally subdued, they like kidnap women for wives from all the other tribes. They create this huge mess, and it feels like a fulfillment of this particular prophecy, that their nature is described by this ravenous animal. And our natures are the same way. We love to think that I'm just not contributing anything to the lack of peace in the world or in my life or my relationships. But we are so much more like wolves and lions and bears, ravenous, hungry, a gaping maw, never fed, chasing down, than we are a cow. Cows are big. Have you ever been around a cow? I mean, we're in the city. Cows are big, but they're so gentle. They're so peaceful. We are just not like that. We're not like it at all. And the thing is that we're not just not like that towards other people, we're not like that with ourselves. And in some ways, this whole conversation about peace, the rubber really begins to hit the road once we start to ask, why do I not have peace with myself? Like, why don't I have internal peace? Why is my nature at war against itself? Why am I constantly conflicted against myself? Why am I constantly criticizing myself and tearing myself down? Why can I not just sit and be settled in myself? And you feel this in your life. You feel it when these external things outside of you are swirling and are not at peace, but they all have internal symptoms of going, why do I constantly feel stirred up? Why am I not able to just feel in myself at peace? The French philosopher Blaise Pascal said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And we're like this. We don't have peace in our own lives. We're robbed of peace personally in our own lives. And so often we think, I'm going to feel at peace once all those external things are fixed. Once the externals in my life, and we sort of like bargain. We do this weird bargaining. We're like, I know that not everything is going to be fixed. Okay, but I've got a few things. Just one or two things. We bargain with God or bargain with ourselves. These are the one or two or three things, four things that I need in order to have peace in my life. And once I have them, I'm going to feel peaceful. But the truth that you need to receive today is that if your peace hinges on the things that you're looking for to be set and peaceful and settled in your external world, it's never going to happen. You're never going to be peaceful. Because the externals of your life are going to throw conflict after chaos after crash into your life from now until the day you die. It's never going to end. And there's actually a weird way in which obsessing over trying to have things in our life just in the right place robs us of our peace even more. Because our peace begins to get spent on just our micromanaging of the smallest, minute details in our lives. We need to be freed from needing to have our externals peaceful in order to receive internal peace. We need internal peace regardless of what is happening in the chaos of the world around us and the things in our life that are out of our control and that are always going to be out of our control. God is able to give that to us by giving us a new nature. We need a new nature. The whole world needs a new nature. This whole world needs to learn peace. It needs to learn peace, to have the way of peace being something that it knows that we're swimming in. And God is doing that. God is making a world of peace through this time. I know it doesn't look like it. I know it looks like the forces of chaos are winning. But God is using this time to make peaceful people who will one day live in a peaceful kingdom. That is what he's doing in this time. And so while we look forward to the day when all of creation has its nature changed to the way of peace, when there's no more chaos or harm or hurt or destruction because we all have learned peace, this world has learned peace. While we await that day, God gives us the chance now to have a peaceful nature internally, where we anticipate in our own nature the way the world is going to be when God makes it one day fully peaceful. Our nature must be changed in order for us to become peaceful. Verse 9 says, "They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." Peace is a matter of what you know. And this text says that the world will have peace once it knows God, once it is full of the knowledge of God. And not just a sort of one-off knowledge of God, not just a sort of, I heard something about God once upon a time and now I go on with my life. The way that this world works, right? We live in a weird time where knowledge of God is optional. We can dip in and out of the knowledge of God. But a day is coming, this text says, when the knowledge of God has so filled this reality, has so filled this world, it's filled it like waters cover the sea, the text says. I don't know if you know this, but the sea is made up of water. Right? We're not talking about like a tarp over this. It's not some surface level covering. To talk about the knowledge of God filling this reality like waters cover the sea is to say that this whole reality will be soaked in the knowledge of God, that we will walk and breathe the knowledge of God like fish swim in the sea. It will be all around us all the time. It will be impossible not to know God. And when that happens, the nature of this world will be changed and we will be changed into peaceful people. But God says that you can have that now in your own life by knowing Jesus. That if you know Jesus, your nature, yourself, your individual person can be so full of the knowledge of God through believing in him that you can have the knowledge of God that makes you peaceful in your own life. That's what the Bible says. That by knowing God's Son, Jesus, and believing on his name, your nature can begin to change so that you become peaceful. You know, I don't know if anyone's ever asked you the question, maybe they've asked you more of like superhero powers, right? Like, if you could have the power of a superhero for one day, well, what would you have, right? And everyone's got an answer. I wonder if anyone's ever sort of asked that question, like with respect to animals. Like, if you could grab like one animal ability, right? Like, what would you have, right? Yes, Hannah, you have thought about it. Hannah, what would you choose? One day.
Probably like a tiger because they are really fast swimmers, and then they also like are really athletic and can climb.
Fantastic. Devouring the prey. Exactly. Elizabeth, did you have something? Did you have an animal?
That to be a peaceful animal.
Oh, you see, well, that is the right. That's where this is going. So, Elizabeth had the right answer. You know, I would choose like an eagle. I would love to fly for a second, right? Maybe some of you are like more introverted and you're like want to choose some camouflage or something, right? We all have some sort of animal thing. We're like, yeah, I would love to choose that. You know, when God asked Jesus that question, when Jesus thought, what animal would I like to be like? Jesus said, you know, I think I would like to be a lamb. I think I'd like to be a lamb. Stans and I lived in the UK for 2 years. In the spring of 2014, we toured Ireland, and all these fresh little lambs were just out in all the Irish countryside. They just offer nothing other than joy and peace. I mean, honestly, nothing. There's nothing else that you would, if you're like, what would I get by identifying myself with a lamb? You get nothing but peace. And Jesus said, you know, that's me. That's what I'm like. In my nature, you and I are eagles with claws and tigers with teeth and bears. And Jesus is like, you know, in my nature, I'm like a lamb. And we all need more lamb in our nature. We need more of Jesus in our nature. When John the Baptist saw Jesus walk along, he said this. He said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, who is peaceful and meek in his nature. And when we believe in Jesus, God gives us spiritual power to become peaceful. And I mean, like, actually believe in Jesus. Like, yes, caveat. Religious violence. Those people don't believe in Jesus. God. It's possible to do all sorts of things in a religious wash that's not about Jesus. We all know this, right? Everyone here knows this. Everyone in this room is fighting for real faith in an age of discouragement, an age of challenge, an age when we watch bad behavior all around, through all corners of the church. But it still is worth it because the Bible thinks it's worth it for us to keep a real flame of faith alive in Jesus and to keep coming back to him over and over again. And when we see failure in the church and flaws in the church, to say we just didn't have our eyes clearly enough set on Jesus. And so when we believe in Jesus and we see him as the Lamb, God gives us spiritual power through faith to become peaceful people and to have our natures transformed. And there are at least two ways I want to show you that our nature can begin to be transformed when we believe in Jesus and get more lamb in our nature. The first thing, and they're both strength things, actually. That's the interesting thing. They're both certain kinds of strength that we get. The first thing is that we get strength to appear weak. We get strength to appear weak. This world is not a world of peace. It isn't. It's not. And it's not going to be until the knowledge of God fills this earth like the waters fill the sea. And so in this time, in order to have peace in a world that is not peaceful, there are people who have to be willing at times to appear weak. There are people who have to be willing at times to appear meek. There are people who have to be willing to look like they are losing in order for peace to be secured and peace to be achieved. That doesn't mean that we just roll over all the time. Jesus, who is the Lamb, did some pretty unlamb-like things at times. But when the moment of conflict came and the moment of crisis came, Jesus was willing to say, I will look weak. I will look weak in order to walk the way of peace in this conflict. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 7 says this, prophesying about Jesus. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. And you know what? We need this at times to have peace in our own personal lives, because there are some things in our lives personally that we don't have peace about because we just keep grabbing on to the nature of the tiger or the bear or the lion or the snake in order to try to attack it in our life or to get what we want. And sometimes there are certain things that we want so badly in our lives that in order to have peace in that thing, we have to come to God and say, God, I'm willing to be weak in this thing. I'm weak before you in this thing. Bring me your peace. I'm weak, but I believe in you. Bring me your peace. The second thing that God gives us, turns us into peaceful people when we believe in Jesus and get more lamb into our life, is strength to sacrifice for peace. Not just strength to appear weak or appear meek at the right times, but strength to full-on sacrifice. Because this world maims lambs. This world kills lambs. But we believe that peace isn't just passivity. It is spiritual power that will one day be vindicated by God. And for all that the Bible has to say about Jesus as the Lamb and the way that that speaks to us about his peaceful nature, the Bible is clear that Jesus is a triumphant Lamb. One of the last times we see the Lamb is in the book of Revelation, chapter 5, verse 12. And the text is saying this about the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. Power, wealth, wisdom, might, honor. These are things that don't seem to fit with lambs. But who wants to be the world's most powerful lamb? But this is the paradoxical nature of spiritual reality and the power of the Spirit as it's on display in this world, in this sinful world, in this violent and broken world. It looks like weakness. It looks like meekness. It looks like sacrifice and loss, but all peaceful people will be vindicated. They will have their peace vindicated by God. There are signs of that in this world, but it will come fully when God brings to us the kingdom of heaven, and all peace will inherit the kingdom of heaven and be vindicated there. Our world needs peace. Our world is longing for peace, even as it doesn't know how to be peaceful. Jesus of Nazareth entered into this into this violent world, shining the light of peace, and offers to everyone who believes in him a transformation into a peaceful, lamb-like nature. And when we are transformed into people of peace through belief in Jesus, more and more lights of peace come on in a world that is dark and violent. And we witness to the reality of God, the reality of the God who is building a world of peace, a peaceful place, and we look forward to a day when the nature of this world will be utterly changed, so that we will all know God, and we will know God's peace, and we will have peace with others and with ourselves and with the God who created us. Amen.